Alright, guys. Another one? Why the fuck not, man? The script for today is instinct is acknowledged and accepted, then refined, reformed. Yes. Reformed. What? Yeah. The more it is right, the more it grows, the less needless thoughts and wasteful actions you have. All right. Let us. I'm going to reread it a couple of times. Instinct is acknowledged, accepted, then reformed. The more it is right, the more it grows, the less needless thoughts and wasteful actions you have. Hold on a second. All right, I'm back. So thinking about instinct, the first response was, "Who the fuck are you to think about instinct?" But I'm gonna walk through this mini script thing that I wrote. Instinct is acknowledged, accepted, right? And the idea is you kind of have that gut feeling, you have that kind of your attention is going towards something. You have a thought that keeps coming in your head, right? And an instinctive thought normally does not kind of belong to the environment that it's in. I'd be sitting next to family and I'm thinking of work, right? That means I'm not present, but that also means something beyond the current environment is being triggered or kind of being called for or whatever it is. So the idea is the first thing you kind of acknowledge that there's something pointing in a certain direction that you're not in control over. It's something that is innate, or the instinct is innate, but it's something that kind of happens on its own. You kind of don't know when it comes, when it goes, or any of that shit. So instinct is acknowledged, accepted, but then reformed. F-I. I feel like I'm reading this wrong. F-O-U-N-C-I-D. Refined? Let's yeah, because the idea is you kind of when you instinctively are kind of when you notice an instinctual thing that's going on, one of the first things that you kind of click with, there's kind of there's this doubt or trust, right? Where's it coming from? Why? And that's where thoughts kind of come in and feelings kind of get mixed in the whole aspect of it. But here's where you kind of here's where your consciousness kind of lives, because instinct happens in an unconscious way. It happens consciously in its own self, but you're not conscious around it. So what happens is you kind of you test it, you follow it, you chase it around, and kind of something comes out of it. And naturally based on your judgment, right? Because if you're a total fucking idiot, then chances are you're not going to be able to kind of test if it's right or wrong. But again, you kind of need to be an idiot in order for you to kind of go for it. And what's the point of thinking after you go for it? You just went for it, and whatever happens, happens. And these two kind of like approaches. One is I will walk any way I fucking want, and the other one is more like, I'd walk, see what's going on, and then walk and see what's going on. So the more it is right, then the more it grows. Why? Because you're kind of like giving it the positive feedback. It's like, you did good. Whatever triggered you, I'm not involved, but I like the end result, or I like the fact that when we moved in that direction. And so the more basically it's right, the more it grows, and then the less needless thoughts and wasteful actions you have. Because ultimately, when it comes to taking decisions, we tend to know the decision we want to take from the beginning. And it's something fairly straightforward and important that we've been doing over a while, because throughout the course of our lives. What ends up happening is you kind of take a decision, but it takes you a while to convince yourself in it. So it's not taking the decision that becomes the thinking process. The thinking process is replaced with either a convincing process, a rumination process, an assessment process, right? And the decisions that you take instinctively don't necessarily mean they are wrong, but they're based on what you have basically acknowledged throughout your life. Because like if I've been doing things a certain kind of way over a while, then ultimately the minute I see it, the instinct kicks in. It's there's a Japanese thing that what they do is when it comes to like chicks, because the thing about chicks, the dudes and dudettes basically of the chickens, is they kind of have to, the sooner they decide who is a dude and who is a chick, the sooner they'll the more they save, the less cost they spend. Because like a chick kind of like doubles in size on a daily basis and eats double its own fucking weight or something in food, or double the food on every day. And its lifespan is about 29 to like 32 days for it to get to optimal height before they harvest it. I don't think that's humane. But the idea behind it is that fact that like you have to figure out the sex of the chicken earlier on in order for them to be able to like separate them, or at the very least to separate the ones that they allow to grow and the ones they won't allow to grow. Horrible, I know. But so they have a thing called a sexter, and the sexter basically just instinctively kind of like throughout the years just kept observing smaller chicks and taking decisions, and then looking at his decisions and seeing which ones are right or wrong. And they basically like evolved into figuring out which one are males and which one aren't males at like 3 or 4 days old or something like that, or 2 days old. And you can only teach it by having people kind of like watch them kind of like do it over and over again thousands of times every day, so that after a couple of months, 3 months, those people kind of like instinctively develop that this is a dudette experience. The idea with instinct is it's just the same way as the thinking process. It's a feedback loop. But it's an active feedback loop. It's not a passive one, right? Because when it comes to like any other thinking process that you have, you kind of like throw it out there and you look for something that returns. But when it comes to instinct, you kind of have to acknowledge that, hey man, you instinctively pointed a certain kind of direction. This happened, and I said yes to it. Where did it come from? I have no idea. But I'll test it for the sake of seeing if I can trust it or not. And I feel like we do a lot of these kind of like things within our day-to-day activities, convincing ourselves that we are the ones who are thinking. But again, like it's the whole like decision has been taken instinctively. You kind of like figured out the decision, and 90-point-something% of the time, that's the right decision to take. But what we do is we spend more time kind of like ruminating or trying to like figure out if it's a right decision or not. And that could be considered a part of the feedback loop, by the way. Why not? We can give ourselves that. But we don't necessarily, like, we're not really like going, okay, like we're never actually acknowledging that the decision was taken first and then the thinking process came after in order to like adjust whether the decision is correct or not. So that feedback loop doesn't go towards the instinct. In fact, if anything, it becomes an arrogant thing where you think that you made the decision after 3 days. But the truth is, all you've been doing is weighing the decision over the course of 3 days. The reason I'm using 3 days is because like me and my brother stopped talking after like an incident like that. Because like he had a decision he needed to make. And after 3 days, he came back with the same thing that me and him discussed wouldn't work. And it's because he completely just like forgot about the thinking process all in all. And he just found himself sitting there going, like, I just want to take this decision. I was like, fucking take it, bro. It's your money. But anyways, so the idea behind instinct is that first, it's acknowledged and it's accepted, regardless if it's right or wrong, how it makes you feel. There's a trigger, something kind of like told you no or yes. And then you're looking at it and you're kind of like, yes, I love you, you're here, me and you are in this together. Fuck it, you're seeing something I don't. I have no idea what it is. And by doing that, basically, you allow for it to kind of like enter a stage where it's kind of like vulnerable to your observation, and that kind of like allows for a bit of reforming. And so the more it's kind of like, it proves to be right, instinctively, you're kind of like looking at it and going like, yeah, fuck, that worked. Khomeini, that's right. Oh, that didn't work. And it's like, okay, so like, whatever didn't work is instantly readjusted within yourself. And so the more it's right, the more it grows. And then the less needless thoughts, because as it grows, you're developing trust with it. It's there, you're asking it, you're checking with it before you make a move. You're connecting with yourself at a level where you're able to kind of like, I've been doing this for so long. I'm gonna trust what I say without me having to think about it. Isn't that the whole point? Like, do you ask your feet how they walk? No, you just kind of rely on them. So why wouldn't you want to rely on instinct? And the idea, like, the less needless thoughts, because sometimes we have the same thought in different areas, in different angles, only in order for us to understand it purely. And wasteful actions that basically kind of like are within the thinking process or testing process in order to like kind of prove if it's the right decision or not, if our instinct was correct or not. So if you acknowledge your instinct and accept it, then on its own, it kind of like gets reaffirmed or reformed, and you give it a chance to create a feedback loop by accepting it, so that every single thing you do after the instinct clicks, after the instinct is accepted, is basically you kind of like allowing it to, giving it credit, so that whatever you do afterwards leads to it actually expanding on itself and this world. It's a video, and I love you guys. Yay.